I always thought I was protecting my daughter, until the day she looked me in the eyes and did something that sent chills down my spine. That moment brought me face to face with my past, with the ghosts I thought I had left behind. What I uncovered after that changed everything. The truth I found could destroy our family, or it could save us once and for all. What happened next will surprise you. Don't miss this story and make sure to subscribe to the channel for more revelations like this. I didn't know it back then, but my childhood was marked by a lie that, over time, would become my prison. A lie that wasn't spoken aloud, but hidden in gestures that no one could see, not even the people closest to us. In Riverton, our house was a symbol of respect. My mother was always seen as the perfect housewife, the woman who baked the best chocolate cake, kept everything immaculate, and never let any imperfection show. That was what everyone saw. But behind the facade, something much darker was happening. Something I, in my innocence, couldn't recognize as a child. I remember her smile. Not the kind, welcoming smile everyone knew, but the one she would give me when my father, tired from working the fields, would come home. It was a forced smile, one that quickly turned bitter. A smile that wasn't for me. It was for hiding what she did when my father wasn't home. A secret she kept hidden, but something I knew in some way. The other men. I didn't understand at first, but I knew she would meet with them when my father went out to the fields. They would come to our house, always during the times I was left alone, and I could hear the whispers from behind closed doors. And all of this, all the weight of the blame, fell on me. I was the one at fault. No matter what happened, my mother always made me feel like I was the one destroying her life. I saw the contempt in her eyes, as if somehow everything that happened in our house was my fault. I didn't know what to do with that feeling. When the pain became too much, it turned into something I hid from everyone. Her words still echo in my mind, still haunt me today. It's because of you that nothing went right. I heard that often, and each time I felt smaller, more invisible, as if my pain didn't matter. For many years I lived with that feeling. At 16 I left home, thinking that by leaving that house I'd leave behind the weight and what had happened there. But the ghosts never left me. I still heard her words in my head, even when I was far away, even when I tried to build a life of my own, quietly, secretly, without anyone knowing the pain I carried. It wasn't until I became a grandmother, many years later, that the memories came rushing back with force. I saw something in my granddaughter's eyes that froze me inside. When she hugged me, there was something in her gesture that made me recall the same silent cry for help I used to make when I was a child. It was like she was saying, "I need help, but I don't know how to ask." I saw the pain in her eyes, the same pain I had seen in my own, long ago. And then I realized that, while the story was repeating itself, the victim was no longer me, but my daughter. I found myself at a crossroads. What do? Reveal everything that happened, expose my daughter, destroy her life as my mother had, destroyed mine, or live in the lie, just as she did with me? The decisions I made after that would change my life forever. Each choice cost me something valuable. I was trapped in a cycle that, no matter how hard I tried, seemed impossible to break. And now, with the pain of my granddaughter written across her face, I knew the next choice I made would be the hardest one of all. What would I do? I didn't know yet, but I knew there would be no turning back. The days after that moment with my granddaughter were a blur. I kept seeing her face, her eyes, the way she hugged me, and the fear in her touch. It was like I was seeing myself as a child again, helpless and desperate for someone to understand. I couldn't shake the image of her little hands gripping my waist, as if holding on for dear life. It made me realize how much of my own pain I had buried, how much I had never shared with anyone. I knew something was wrong, something that went deeper than I could admit, but the truth was a dangerous thing, one that could destroy everything I had built over the years. The secrets my mother had kept, the lies she told, they had shaped who I was. They had shaped the way I raised my daughter. And now I was seeing the same patterns repeating themselves. I couldn't ignore it anymore, but the thought of confronting my daughter terrified me. I kept thinking about the day I left home, the day I walked out of that house, never looking back. I thought that leaving would give me freedom, but it didn't. The pain followed me, and now it was following my daughter. Could I stop it? Could I prevent the cycle from continuing, or was it already too late? I spent the next few days watching my daughter more closely, paying attention to her actions, her behavior. I watched how she interacted with my granddaughter, and I saw the same coldness I had felt from my mother. There were moments when she would smile, but it wasn't real. It was just like my mother's smile, a smile to hide something deeper, something darker. My heart sank as I realized how much I had missed over the years. I had been so consumed with my own pain that I failed to see what was happening in front of me. I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to confront her, had to ask her what was going on. But I didn't know how. I was terrified of the truth. What if I was wrong? What if my suspicions were just my mind playing tricks on me? I couldn't bear the thought of destroying my daughter's life the way my mother had destroyed mine. But at the same time, I knew I couldn't live with myself if I ignored it. That night, I sat by the window, watching the stars. It felt like the only thing that made sense, the only thing that didn't lie. I wondered how many people out there were living with the same kind of pain, the same kind of fear. The thought made my chest tighten. I had never talked about it with anyone. I had never allowed myself to truly process what had happened to me. But now, seeing my granddaughter's pain, I knew I couldn't keep running from the truth. It was in that moment that I made the decision. I had to talk to her. I had to ask the questions that had been burning inside me for so long. But I wasn't prepared for what I would find. The next morning, I gathered the courage to visit my daughter's house. My hands trembled as I knocked on the door. When she opened it, I could see the surprise in her eyes, but she quickly masked it with a smile. "Mom, what brings you here?" she asked, her voice too bright, too cheerful. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stepped inside, feeling the weight of everything I had been carrying. I looked at her, and then at my granddaughter, who was playing quietly in the corner. The silence between us felt suffocating. My heart raced as I finally found my voice. "I need to talk to you," I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. "About you. About what's happening with you and Emily." Her smile faltered, and I saw the tension in her body. It was the same tension I had seen in myself years ago, before the storm hit. "What do you mean, Mom?" she asked, her voice now tinged with uncertainty. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I see what's happening. I see the way you're treating her. I know what's going on, and I need to know if I'm right." The room grew colder as the words hung in the air. I could feel her eyes on me, searching for an answer, but I wasn't going to back down. Not this time. Not for her. Not for Emily. The silence that followed was deafening, and I knew that everything was about to change. For a moment, my daughter didn't say a word. Her eyes, once filled with a smile that never quite reached her heart, now held something I couldn't quite read. I had seen that look before, on my own face many years ago, When I had tried to deny the truth to myself, I had tried to bury it deep inside, hoping that maybe if I didn't confront it, it would disappear. But it never did. And now, it was happening again. This time, though, I wasn't running from it. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, each beat louder than the last. I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep my composure. Her gaze shifted from me to the ground, and for a brief second I thought she was going to dismiss me, tell me I was overreacting. But then, her voice broke the silence. "What do you want me to say, Mom?" she whispered, her voice thin, almost pleading. "It's not like you think. You don't know what it's like. You don't understand." The words stung more than I expected. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, but I didn't move. I knew that what I was about to hear would be something I couldn't undo. The years of silence, the years of pretending everything was fine, had come to this moment. I stepped closer, my voice barely above a whisper. "I understand more than you think. I know what it feels like to be trapped, to feel like there's no way out. But you have to see it. You have to recognize what's happening before it destroys everything." Her shoulders tensed and I saw the faintest tremor in her hands. I never wanted this for Emily. I didn't mean for her to feel like I feel. But it's just so hard. Everything is so hard. She paused, her voice cracking, as she looked away, wiping her eyes quickly. "And I don't know how to fix it." The vulnerability in her voice cut through me like a knife. I had never heard her speak like this before. My heart softened for a moment, but then the familiar ache took its place. The same ache I had carried for all these years, the ache that had never truly healed. I knew what she meant. I knew how hard it was to break free from the cycle, to unlearn the behaviors that had been ingrained into us for so long. But I also knew something that she didn't yet see. It was possible to stop it, to break the pattern. But it required more than just words. It required facing the truth head on, no matter how much it hurt. "I know it's hard," I said gently, "but you can't keep hiding from it. You can't keep pretending it's not there." I paused, taking a deep breath. "You're repeating the same mistakes, and it's going to hurt Emily the same way it hurt me. You don't want that for her, do you?" She flinched at my words, and I could see the tears welling in her eyes. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The silence between us stretched, and I could feel the weight of her regret, her fear, hanging in the air like a thick fog. "I don't know how to stop," she whispered, finally meeting my gaze. "I don't know how to make it right." The words hung in the air, and I realized something in that moment. She was me. She was the little girl I once was, trapped in a cycle she didn't know how to break. She had inherited the same pain I had, and now it was up to me to help her, find the strength to break free. "I can help you," I said softly, the weight of my own words sinking in. "But you have to let me. You have to face the truth, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. We can't keep living like this." She looked at me, and for the first time I saw something in her eyes. Something I hadn't seen in years. Hope. A glimmer of it. "I want to stop," she said, her voice stronger now. "I want to do better. For her. For me. But I don't know where to start." I reached out and gently took her hand in mine. "We start together," I said, "one step at a time." And for the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years. Hope that maybe, just maybe, we could break the cycle. Maybe we could start fresh. But as I looked over at Emily, who was still quietly playing in the corner, I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be pain, There would be struggles, but we would face it together. The hardest part was yet to come, but for the first time, I wasn't alone in it. The days that followed felt like a slow, painful crawl. My daughter and I had started talking more openly, but it wasn't easy. Every conversation felt like we were unearthing buried wounds that neither of us was ready to face. She would cry, and I would sit beside her, holding her hand, knowing that this was just the beginning. She wanted to change. I could see it in her eyes, but change, real change, was never easy, and I had learned that the hard way. There were moments when we would sit in silence, neither of us knowing exactly what to say. The weight of the truth hung heavy between us. But there were also small victories. She would smile at Emily in a way that seemed more genuine than before, and I would catch myself thinking that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for healing. For her, for me, and for Emily. But every time I started to believe that things might get better, the fear would creep back in. What if this was all just temporary? What if, in a few weeks, things would return to the way they were? My mother's voice, the one I'd carried inside me for so long, would resurface, whispering that nothing ever really changed. I had to fight those voices, fight the instinct that told me to give up. I knew better than anyone how easy it was to slip back into old patterns. I'd done it myself, countless times, and I could see that my daughter was struggling, torn between wanting to be better and being afraid of failing. There were moments when I saw her stare blankly at the walls, lost in her thoughts, and I knew she was wondering if it was all worth it. One evening, as we sat in the kitchen together, Emily ran over to us, holding a drawing she had made. "Look, Grandma! Look what I made!" She beamed, her eyes sparkling with excitement. It was a picture of our family, my daughter, me, and Emily, together, smiling. It was simple, childish, but in that moment it felt like everything. My heart clenched as I looked at the drawing. It was a symbol of everything I had fought for, everything I had worked to protect. And I realized as I looked at my daughter, and then at Emily, that I couldn't let it slip away. I couldn't let the past dictate the future. "You're doing great, honey," I said to my daughter, my voice soft but firm. "This is a good start. A small step, but it's a start." She smiled faintly, but I could see the doubt still lingering in her eyes. I didn't blame her for it. Change was hard, especially when the past had such a tight grip on you. That night after Emily went to bed, I stayed up late, staring at the stars again, just like I had the night I made the decision to confront my daughter. I thought about how far I'd come, how much I had endured, and how much I still had to endure. But there was something different now. There was a glimmer of hope that I hadn't seen before. It wasn't just the quiet moments, the talks with my daughter, or even Emily's drawing. It was something deeper, something I hadn't realized until that moment. I was no longer just fighting for myself. I was fighting for them. For my daughter, for Emily, for all the generations that came before and after me. And that gave me strength. It gave me a reason to keep going, even when the road seemed long and uncertain. The next few days felt like a turning point. My daughter and I started working on a plan, one that didn't just focus on the problem, but on the solution. We talked about setting boundaries, about being honest with ourselves, about breaking the silence that had held us prisoner for so long. It wasn't going to be easy, and I knew there would be setbacks. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like we were on the right path. As we sat together in the living room one afternoon, I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and for the first time in years, I saw a woman who was willing to fight, not just for herself, but for her family. And in that moment I knew that no matter what happened next, we would face it together. But just as I started to feel a sense of calm, just as I started to think that maybe things were really going to be okay, Emily came running into the room, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. "Grandma," she gasped, her voice shaking. "There's something in the backyard. I saw it. I saw it moving." My heart stopped. The room seemed to freeze, the air thick with tension. I could feel the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "What do you mean, sweetie?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though fear was beginning to creep into my chest. "I don't know," she whispered. It was like a shadow, a big one, and it was moving like a person." I stood up quickly, my pulse quickening. "Stay here, Emily. We're going to check it out together." But as I turned to my daughter, I saw the same fear in her eyes, the fear I had seen in mine so many years ago. Something was wrong. The backyard was quiet when we stepped outside, but there was something in the air, something that felt different, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Emily stood close to me, her small hand gripping mine so tightly it hurt. Her eyes darted around, scanning the shadows as if she expected something to jump out at any moment. My daughter, too, was on edge. I could see the way her breath caught, in her chest, the way her gaze shifted nervously from one corner of the yard to the next. We walked slowly, cautiously, as if the ground beneath our feet might give way at any moment. The backyard was large, with trees lining the edges, casting long shadows in the fading light of the evening. I could feel the familiar weight of fear settling in my chest, the same fear I had carried with me for years, the fear that something terrible was always just around the corner, waiting for me, waiting for us. "Are you sure you saw something, Emily?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, but it shook despite my best efforts. Emily nodded, her face pale. "Yes, Grandma. It was moving behind the tree. It looked like a person, but it wasn't." I exchanged a quick glance with my daughter, but neither of us spoke. We continued moving forward, the tension between us palpable. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my every step measured and deliberate, as if any sudden movement might trigger something we weren't prepared for. We reached the edge of the yard, where the trees met the darkness. The wind rustled, the leaves, creating a soft, eerie whisper that seemed to echo in the quiet night. I stood still for a moment, listening, trying to hear anything out of place. But there was nothing. Just the wind, just the shadows stretching out in front of us. "Maybe it was just an animal," my daughter suggested, her voice barely above, a whisper. I shook my head. "No. I've lived here long enough to know the difference between an animal and whatever that was." I took a deep breath and stepped forward, my eyes searching the darkening yard. The shadows seemed to stretch, longer with each passing moment, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. It was as if something, or someone, was watching us. Then, just as I was about to turn back, I saw it. A movement in the corner of my eye, something shifting in the darkness. My pulse quickened, and I turned to face it. The shape I saw was just a shadow, but it was large, too large to be anything I recognized. It didn't belong in our yard, in this space that had been so familiar to me for so many years. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice tight with fear. My daughter's eyes followed mine, and she gasped. "Oh my God, it's moving." We froze, all three of us standing motionless, as the shape slowly began to emerge from the shadows. It was too dark to see clearly, but it was there, big and imposing, moving with a deliberate, slow pace. My breath caught in my throat as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. "Emily, go inside," I said, my voice sharp as I felt an overwhelming sense of dread crawl up my spine. "No, Grandma," Emily cried, her voice cracking with fear. "I don't want to go alone." I didn't have time to argue. "Go inside now! It's not safe out here!" Reluctantly, Emily turned and ran toward the house, her footsteps quick and panicked. I watched her until she was safely inside, then turned my attention back to the shadow. It was getting closer, moving closer to the fence, its shape becoming clearer, but I still couldn't make out what it was. I felt my daughter's hand on my arm, urging me to move, to get away. But I couldn't. I couldn't leave without knowing what was happening. I needed to understand. Then, the shadow stopped, right at the edge of the yard, just in front of the trees. And then, just like that, it disappeared. I stood there, staring into the darkness, my heart pounding in my chest. The night seemed to close in around me, the silence deafening, the fear paralyzing. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what I had just seen. But I knew it wasn't something natural. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't a trick of the light. It was something else. Something that had no place in our world. "What the hell was that?" my daughter whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. "I don't know," I whispered back, "but I'm not staying here to find out." Without a word, I turned and walked quickly toward the house, my daughter following close behind. I could hear the sound of her breath, ragged and fast, as we both hurried to the door. I didn't look back. I didn't want to. Once inside, we slammed the door shut and locked it behind us. We leaned against it, both of us breathing heavily, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Emily was sitting on the couch, her eyes wide with fear. "Grandma, what was it? What did you see?" I looked at her, my chest tight with worry. "I don't know, sweetie. But we're safe now. We're inside. And that's what matters." But even as I said the words, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever it wasn't finished. It wasn't over. The night dragged on, the shadows seeming to creep closer with every minute that passed. We stayed inside, locked in the house. But the unease that lingered in the air wouldn't go away. Emily had gone to bed, but I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing noises, creaks and groans in the walls, the wind tapping against the windows as if trying to get in. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shadow, that thing that had been lurking in the backyard. I couldn't shake the image of it. The way it moved so deliberately, as if it knew exactly what it was doing, exactly how to make us feel helpless. I tried to push the fear away, tried to tell myself that maybe it was nothing, that maybe it was just my imagination running wild. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I had lived through enough to recognize when something wasn't right, and everything about tonight felt wrong. I sat in the living room, watching the clock tick by slowly. My daughter had gone to her room, but I could tell she was just as unsettled as I was. We hadn't spoken much since we came inside, both of us too scared to admit what we had seen, too afraid of what it meant. I couldn't help but wonder if it was somehow tied to the past, the things we had hidden for so long, the darkness that had been passed down through the generations. I couldn't deny it any longer. The cycle wasn't just about my daughter, repeating my mistakes. It was about something much deeper, something I couldn't see, but could feel clawing at the edges of our lives. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out into the dark yard. The wind had died down, and everything seemed eerily still. But there was no peace in the silence. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I felt the weight of years of secrets pressing down on me. Suddenly I saw it. The shadow. It was back. I froze. It was at the edge of the yard, just like before, but this time it was closer. I could make out its shape, though it still appeared to be more of a form than a clear figure. It was tall, unnaturally tall, with movements that were jerky and strange. My breath caught in my throat as I realized it wasn't just one figure, but two. The second shadow was smaller, more defined, like a child, and it moved in tandem with the larger one. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, to call out, but my voice was trapped in my throat. I looked around, trying to find my daughter, but she wasn't in the room anymore. Panic set in. I couldn't let her be alone, not with whatever that thing was out there. I ran to her room, but the door was locked. "Mom, what's wrong?" I heard her voice from the other side, thick with fear. "Open the door!" I yelled, banging on it. "Now hurry!" The door swung open, and I grabbed her by the arm, pulling her into the hallway. "We have to get out of here, now." She was shaking, her face pale with terror. "What is it? What's happening?" I didn't know how to explain it. I didn't know what was happening. I only knew that whatever it wasn't safe here anymore. It wasn't safe for any of us. I could hear the sound of something moving outside, heavy footsteps crunching against the gravel in the yard. My mind raced as I thought of ways to protect us, ways to keep us safe, but nothing came to mind. I felt helpless, like I had been when I was a little girl, trapped and powerless. "Mom, we have to do something," she cried. What if it's after us?" I didn't have an answer. All I could do was pull her toward the back door, my thoughts scrambling, my body moving on instinct. We ran through the kitchen and out into the backyard, but when I opened the door, the yard was empty. No shadow, no figures, no movement. My breath came in ragged gasps as I stood in the doorway, looking out into the silent night. It was as if everything had disappeared, as if it had all been a nightmare. I turned to my daughter and she looked just as confused as I felt. "It's gone," she said softly, her voice shaking, but I wasn't so sure. Something told me it wasn't gone. It had just disappeared for now. It was waiting. We stood there for a moment, both of us uncertain of what to do next. I could feel the weight of the silence pressing in on us, and in that moment I realized that this wasn't just a random event. Whatever was happening, whatever we had seen, was part of something bigger. Something I didn't understand yet, but I knew it was connected to us, to our past, to the things we had hidden away for so long. I pulled my daughter back inside and locked the door behind us. "We're not safe here," I whispered, my voice trembling with the fear I couldn't suppress. "I don't know what it is, but I'm not staying to find out." We retreated to the living room, our hearts racing, the fear still clinging to us like a shadow. The night stretched on, each minute feeling like an eternity, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us, waiting for the right moment to strike. The question now was, what were we going to do about it? The hours seemed to blur together as we sat in the living room, the house now eerily quiet. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking just outside, waiting for us to let our guard down. My daughter was sitting on the couch, her hands clenched, tightly together in her lap, her eyes distant, lost in her thoughts. I could tell she was scared, but she was trying to hide it, trying to stay strong for Emily, who had somehow fallen asleep, despite everything that had happened. I had no idea what to do next. We couldn't stay here forever, but where else could we go? The fear that had settled in my chest like a cold stone wasn't something I could just ignore. I couldn't even find comfort in the thought of time passing. because every minute that went by seemed to bring us closer to something we weren't ready for. I glanced over at my daughter, watching her for a moment. "We need to figure out what's happening," I said quietly, breaking the silence that had settled over us. She looked at me, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "How? What do we even do? It's not like we can just ask someone about it. No one's going to believe us." I knew she was right. Who would believe us? Who would believe that something out of the ordinary had come into our lives? That something had crossed the line between the real world and something darker? Something we couldn't explain? "I don't know," I said, rubbing my temples as the weight of the situation pressed down on me. "But we can't just keep hiding. We can't let it win." There was a moment of silence between us as we both sat there, trying to figure out what to do next. The fear was still present, heavy in the air. But there was something else, too. Something that had been growing inside me since that first night I'd confronted my daughter about the past. The realization that the strength we needed wasn't something that came from running away. It wasn't something that came from hiding in fear. It was something we had to find within ourselves. We had to face this. Whatever it was, we couldn't let it control us. "I know you're scared," I continued, my voice softer now, more certain. "But we have to stop running. We have to face whatever this is, head on." My daughter's face softened slightly, and I could see her trying to hold back the tears. "I'm scared, Mom. I don't want Emily to grow up like we did, like I did. I don't want her to carry this with her." I felt a pang in my heart. I had been the same way, trying to protect my daughter from the things I couldn't change, from the things that had already been set in motion before she was born. And now, with Emily, the cycle was repeating itself. "We'll stop it," I said, my voice firm. "We're not going to let it happen to her." My daughter nodded, but her eyes were still filled with doubt, and I couldn't blame her. I had lived through so much, and I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But it was the only road we had left, the only road that might bring us the peace we so desperately needed. I stood up, my legs shaky but determined. "We need to find answers. We need to figure out what this is, why it's happening. We can't just sit here and wait for it to come back." My daughter stood as well, slowly, as if weighing her options. "Where do we even start?" I took a deep breath. "We start with what we know. We start with the past. Everything that's happening now is connected to what we've been through, to the things we've buried, to the things we never talked about. We have to go back to the beginning." She looked at me, a mix of fear and uncertainty still clouding her expression. "But what if it's too late? What if we can't fix this?" I walked over to her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's never too late. We just have to keep going. We can't give up, no matter how hard it gets." We stood there for a long moment, the weight of everything we'd been through pressing down on us. But something had shifted. Something had changed. For the first time since everything started, I felt like we were on the right path. Maybe the path wasn't clear, and maybe it wasn't going to be easy. But we had to walk it, together. I looked over at the back door, where we had seen the shadow, and then at Emily, sleeping peacefully in her room, unaware of the storm that was swirling just outside our door. I had to do this, for her, for all of us. "Let's go," I said, my voice steady now. "We have to face it." And with that, we stepped into the unknown, ready to confront whatever darkness lay ahead. The morning light came far too quickly, filling the house with a harsh brightness that did nothing to calm the storm inside me. We had decided to confront whatever it was that was haunting us. But now that the moment had arrived, The weight of it all felt almost unbearable. We couldn't keep running, couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. But the fear still lingered, gnawing at my insides, making every step feel heavier than the last. My daughter and I had barely spoken since last night. We both knew that what we were about to do would change everything, whatever it was, whatever had been hiding in the shadows. It wasn't just a simple threat. It was something deeper, something that tied into the very fabric of our lives. But I couldn't let that stop me. Not this time. I glanced over at my daughter, who was standing near the window, looking out into the yard. Her face was pale, and her eyes were filled with doubt. But there was something else, too. Something I hadn't seen in her for a long time. Strength. She was finally ready to face the truth. "Are you ready?" I asked, my voice low, the fear still clinging to me. She turned to me, her gaze steady, and nodded. "We have no choice, do we?" "No," I said, my voice firm despite the tremor in my chest. "We don't." We stepped outside, the air thick with the scent of fresh earth and the heavy weight of unanswered questions. The yard was silent, still. Nothing stirred, but I could feel the tension in the air like a storm waiting to break. The shadows were longer now, the sun barely peeking over the horizon, casting the yard in a soft golden light. But the warmth didn't reach us. Not today. I looked toward the edge of the yard, where the shadows seemed to gather, pooling around the trees, like something alive, the place where the figure had been the night before. It was the same, but different. There was something more ominous about it now, as if whatever had been lurking there before was waiting for us, waiting to see what we would do. "I don't know what's out there," I whispered, more to myself than to my daughter. "But we're going to find out." My daughter stepped closer, her hand brushing against mine. It was a simple gesture, but it meant everything. We were in this together, no matter what. We walked toward the trees, the ground soft beneath our feet. And as we reached the spot where the shadow had been, I stopped. There was nothing there, no movement, no figures. The yard was as still as it had been before. The shadows stretched long but harmless. I felt a flicker of hope, but it was quickly extinguished by the overwhelming sense of wrongness that filled the air. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that something was waiting just beyond the edge of our vision. "Do you feel it?" my daughter asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah," I replied, my throat dry. "I feel it." We stood there for a moment, the silence pressing in on us, suffocating. And then, as if on cue, the air shifted. A cold breeze swept through the yard, rustling the leaves of the trees. It wasn't the wind. This was something else. And then, from the corner of my eye, I saw it again. A shadow moving in the distance. It was closer this time, much closer. And it wasn't just one figure. It was more than that. Shapes, shifting and swaying like silhouettes caught in a slow-motion dance. I took a step forward, but my daughter stopped me. "Mom, don't." "We can't back down now," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "We have to face it." We moved together, our steps measured and cautious, as if we were walking through a nightmare we couldn't wake up from. The shadows seemed to draw closer, their forms becoming more distinct, more real. They were figures, people. But they weren't people. Not anymore. They moved with an unnatural grace, like something out of a dream, or maybe a nightmare. I stopped in my tracks, my heart pounding. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking but defiant. "What do you want from us?" The shadows didn't answer. They just moved closer, their forms becoming clearer, the air around us growing colder with every passing second. And then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, they stopped. They didn't move anymore. They stood there watching us, their faces hidden in the darkness. My daughter's breath hitched beside me. "What are they? Why are they here?" I didn't have an answer. I didn't know who or what they were, but I knew they were tied to us, tied to everything we had buried in the past. "We have to go," I said, my voice tight with fear. "Now." But as we turned to leave, the shadows shifted again, blocking our path. There was no escape. We were trapped. My heart raced. "What do you want?" I screamed, my voice raw with panic. "What do you want from us?" A voice, low, cold, and distant, came from the shadows. "It's not what we want from you. It's what you must face. The past. The truth." The words hung in the air, and in that moment, everything became clear. The shadows weren't here to hurt us. They were here to make us face the truth we had been hiding from for so long. I turned to my daughter, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. Understanding. She knew now. She understood what we had to do. We couldn't run anymore. We had to face it. We had to face the truth. And with that, the shadows began to fade, slowly retreating into the darkness, leaving us standing in the yard, alone. But the truth had been set free, and we had survived it.